wearing a poppy today, I want to make sure you know that we didn't forget. Just a word of wisdom to those who ever plan a surprise party. Don't do the surprise party. I've said this before, a week after the birthday, because it looks a lot like you're just thinking last minute after the fact that you've forgotten the birthday. So just a word of wisdom. So I want to let you know that we haven't forgotten Remembrance Day, but we were trying to make a decision what day to do it on. So we've decided to do our Remembrance Day service, or a portion of the service that honors those people who have given their lives, in our service next week. It's kind of funny because Remembrance Day is on Saturday, so we've decided to make that a part of next weekend's service. So on the 12th, we'll be doing that and partaking in a time of remembering at the beginning of next week's service. Take your Bibles, turn to James chapter 3. I've been doing a series on life. It's kind of a two-part series. We did a series on life and out of Psalms 37, some good practical words out of Psalm 37. And now we've been doing the book of James, and we're now on James chapter 3, and specifically dealing with proclamation, our mouths, our words, what we say, what we write. Time and again, scriptures address the tongue, our words. In fact, James devotes a whole chapter to it. This whole book. Words are wonderful when used in the proper way. They can encourage, they can edify, they can correct, they can put on the right track, they can give confidence. The right word at the right time, in the right way, can be life-changing. How many you can think of somebody that in a positive way spoke a word, a phrase to you, and you're thinking of it now, that was life-changing? Anything, words. I can think of one of my wife when she said, yes. It's definitely life-changing for me. Will you marry me? Yes. Those are some powerful words right there, let me tell you. Even though I kind of felt like she was going to say yes, you still feel a little bit weird when what we say can make such a difference. The tongue can be used for great good or great evil. How many have heard the phrase, bite your tongue? Heard that? Now, I want to preface this with, don't be too zealous with this, but I want you to try that with me right now. Just bite your tongue. Not hard, but bite your tongue. Want to do that right now? Everybody try to bite now. Some of you are trying. Some of you are not even trying. I'm not biting my tongue. Try it. Now, what I want you to say, I want you to turn to the person beside you and say, welcome to faith, while you're biting your tongue. I want you to try it. Just try to do that now. Well, that's some profound preaching right there. You got to. It's pretty hard to do. The point is, you bite your tongue, and why we say that phrase is you don't have to say everything that you can say. Now, interesting enough, a sermon we're talking about speaking, and because of the way of the service, we've never had so many things, I don't think, in the service. Communion Sunday, baby dedication, a baptismal service, putting all that in, said, we're going to have a real short message. So I think that's fitting on a message we're talking about. You don't have to say everything you know. You don't have to say everything you could say, and make sure that's going to be how ironic would it be if this was one of my longest messages ever? Or that would be. You hold back when you could give someone a peace of mind. It might even be true. You probably could say it, and it might be accurate. It might even be a fact. But you don't have to say it. James 3 talks about this awesome, small, mighty member of the body. So let's look at some of the truths. Number one is a strict warning. Not many of you, James chapter 3, verse 1, not many of you should become teachers. Well, there's a real affirming word, eh? Here he started off talking about the power of the tongue, and he goes, there's not a lot of you that should teach. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. the less you say, the less you have to answer for. Teachers and preachers talk a lot. Some of you are really quiet looking at me when I say that. I thought for sure I'd get an amen, but now you're not sure. That's very wise of you, thinking that maybe, not everything has to be said. James is saying, pay attention. You say you want to be a teacher. You say we want to be the one talking, but be very careful, because all of us have to answer for what we say. We'll give an account. Some things are better left unsaid. Keep that in mind next time you're sending off that email that has a little bit more emotion in it than it should. Keep it in mind after or before you send that hasty tweet or Instagram post or Facebook post. It's better to bite your tongue than give a piece of your mind. If you give someone a piece of your mind, do you have peace of mind? Very rarely. Isn't that ironic? When we give our peace of mind, we give away peace of mind. I was going to say a little stronger word here, but I'll say it this way. Social media lends itself to verbal waste. Verbal waste was a polite way of saying other words that probably best not said in a message about careful what you say. I love social media, but the problem is, for some reason, we feel like we can get away with more by saying it to our phone in a dark room somewhere, licking our wounds. We feel like we can send it out that way, and we are much more bolder in those situations through those mediums than we are face to face. And because of that feeling, I don't think it's accurate. I think we just feel we have an inaccurate understanding of that this is not going to affect us negatively somehow, that we are safe by saying it to our phone. Because if we were standing in front of the person, we'd never say those things. But because they're not there, we feel we can say it. And by saying it, it still has the same repercussions and consequences. We all have to answer for our spoken, written, and texted words. So, be careful. Be careful what you say, what you write, what you post, what you text. It's a good little beginning. Here's where it gets a little bit messier, verse 2. Stumbling. For we all stumble in many ways. And if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. We all stumble in many ways. The only one that can say, I never stumble, is Jesus himself. Other than that, you and I and all of us, we all stumble. In just a couple ways, I love this phrase. We all stumble in many ways. Now that could be, we all stumble many ways, or there's many different ways to stumble. Remember Pastor Day's message a couple weeks ago about saying, well, what is difficult and a temptation to you might be not a temptation to me, but we may all have many different ways of stumbling. James has talked about this earlier. But we also can recognize that we all have many different ways that we stumble. Now, you all clean up real well. I even put a tie on today for church. You can dress up, clean up, shampoo, deodorant, spritz a little bit of some nice cologne or perfume, and you come in, walk into church. We clean up pretty good. But the truth is, we all stumble in many ways. I don't know why I get it. It's personal. We don't want to talk about it. But and you might have a problem with that statement. But can I encourage you not to argue with God? It's better to admit than to argue with God. We all stumble. Sometimes we say some dumb things. Sometimes we make some foolish decisions. Sometimes we jump to conclusions. Sometimes we're just too slow to forgive, or we get angry too quick. Sometimes we make hasty judgments. Sometimes we criticize before we know all the facts. Sometimes we judge others while at the same time making the same excuse for ourselves. Sometimes we make mountains out of molehills. Sometimes we speak before we listen. Sometimes we brag too much, making over the fact that we feel like we're underappreciated. Sometimes we use words as weapons. Sometimes we belittle those who have a different position than us. We all stumble in many ways. Romans 3:23 says, "For all have fallen short of the glory of God." All have sinned. Same kind of thought. All have made the mistake. This is what's called, and it's in the Roman road of salvation. Some of you may have heard of it. When you're leading someone to put their faith in Christ and explain the plan of salvation, in Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Everybody has stumbled. Everybody's made a mistake. Can you quote the end of verse 22, the last phrase, without looking at it? Probably not. Very interesting. The last phrase of Romans 3:22, just before the writer of Romans says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God," is, "There is no difference." You see, it's very important to read, "All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God," along with the phrase, "There is no difference." There is no rich and poor, young and old, male and female, tall and short, black and white, conservative, NDP, or liberal. All have fallen short of the glory of God. There is no difference. Brings me to an interesting part now. Second part of verse 2. "If anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able to bridle his whole body." Now, up until, and for most of the message, I have the verse of Scripture, 1 point, but this one I had to break up in 2. Sins of the tongue lead to sins of the body. It's the inverse of what he's saying in here. If you're able to bridle your tongue, then you're able to bridle your whole body. Why? Because the two are very connected. The word perfect has the word of being whole or complete. Show me someone who is able to control what he says, and you'll show me somebody who is able to control their body. Listen to what Proverbs, very interesting, a book about wisdom, and it talks all the time about talking. Proverbs 21, "Watch your tongue," and this is a new legal, just in case you think this is Pastor Jamie's version, this is the New Living Translation. "Watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut." That's how you watch your tongue and keep your mouth shut. Dad, I'm just, Scripture. Watch your tongue, keep your mouth shut, and you will stay out of trouble. It's connecting what you're saying and what happens around you. Jesus connects what you say and what you do with what's in your heart. Luke chapter 6. "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. An evil man brings evil things out of the evil in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." So Jesus connects them. He says, if you have good in your heart, then good things will be stored up and will happen around you. You have evil in your heart, evil things will happen, because what's out of the abundance of your mouth. He gives you the conveyor of what is in your mouth and what is of what is in your heart to what happens, and it transfers through your mouth. Life or death. So, what is your tongue telling you about your heart? Building up or tearing down? It has incredible power to release or restrain, to offend or befriend. It has the power to affirm or alienate, to build or belittle. It has the power to comfort or criticize. Then he gives us a couple illustrations, steering illustrations in verse 3 and 4. Let me read them for you. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are large and driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. We must learn to control our tongue because even though it is small, it has the power to influence every part of life. These illustrations almost don't even need explanation. A tiny bit controls a massive horse. My mom's able to join us here today, and I remember being on the farm that she grew up on when we would visit at holidays and special times with my grandparents, my Grandpa Clark. He was a horseman. He had Belgium horses, work horses, not like Clydesdales, but almost big. Everything was big. Feet big, muscles big. They were just massive. We would coax them over to the fence and with crab apples out behind by the shed because we weren't now allowed to go into the pasture. So we'd get them as close as we could, and then we could, of course, gets another one of those temptations. We get close as we could, right on the fence. We would sit on the rail fence and bring them closer and closer together, and then we would walk along the rail fence with them, and they would kind of follow the crab apples, and we'd feed them until eventually, because when they come to the fence, they'd be perpendicular. We'd get them parallel to the fence by walking them along the fence, and then when they weren't expecting, one of the cousins would jump on their back, grab a hold of the mane, and hold on. Because they weren't used to be ridden bareback. The problem is they were so massive, and our little wee legs, there was nothing, all you had was the mane. You couldn't hook on at all. You were just kind of, it was really comfortable ride. There wasn't very bony, but and they would take off. And if they wouldn't take off, and there was a couple occasions, I remember one particularly, we jumped on the back, and the horse just stood there. Until a very concerned cousin decided to motivate the horse. Give it a little bit of, and out it would go. These horses were massive, huge horses. I remember Doc and Min were the two horses that my grandpa were the team that he would often use, and I remember in my day being there. I remember seeing how mighty, and my grandpa would take care of them, and he would comb them, and he would do Min's hair, and I remember how massive they were. Beasts. They were just might. He would put leathers on them and chains and strap them up. I remember him pulling a stump out of the ground with them hooked on. You could hear things creaking and cracking, and then he go, just a couple little words, a little flip of a rein, and man, they start pulling, thinking, whoa. You see the power. And Grandpa, he would put the reins one through there and one through there, and he'd hold it like this. He had might. He controlled those things. Turn right, left, stop, go. With a little pull of his hand and a little click and a word from his mouth. G, ha, right, left, and oh. And these massive horses, he guided them. Now, they had a bit in their mouth, but Grandpa very rarely would saw on that bit. He would just use the rein. I remember as a young kid being so impressed and a little bit, almost a healthy respect. I'll never forget coming in the barns, and when you would come straight in the barn, it was a wall, cement wall to your right and stalls to your left. And these horses were right there, and I remember coming in sometimes, and there was one, I know this sounds like a fairy tale, but it's true. There was one called Wild Bill. Wild Bill was a crazy pacer horse that Grandpa had rescued, and it bit people and kicked people, his owner. It was a wild thing. It would get out, grab fences, get them out, bite other horses. he was right in that first section of stalls when you come in. And every time you come in, I remember as a young kid, I would be plastered against a cement wall walking along like this. Because when you would come in, that horse would go like this. And I'm thinking, whoa, what's he doing? It's like he's locked in, you know, if you hear that on a gun. That's what it is. But you come in, he'd look back like this, and he'd go, like lining you up. I'm like, not today, I'm not getting lower. And my grandpa would walk in there and say, hey, Bill. He'd walk in beside that horse, feed that horse. He was another wild one. But Grandpa would guide him. I remember him doing races and being on a sulky. And this horse was just giving her. Grandpa wouldn't whip it, but he would guide that horse in his power and speed with just a rein and a bit. 5-inch, few ounce metal bit guiding thousands of pounds of might. Tiny rudders control a huge ship. You see the ships coming down the Welland Canal. Amazes me. See some of the power now. You see the pleasure crafts. Turn it one way, the whole ship turns. The captain turns the ship another way, the whole ship turns. Up in Parry Sound, there's the 30,000 Island Cruise. I don't know if everybody has been on there or seen it, 30,000 Island Cruise. Big kind of, you go around and for the morning or the afternoon, you can see the sunset, or you see the islands in the northern Ontario, Parry Sound, I guess. But it's amazing. You see the ship come in back to port, and it goes to dock, and it comes at a 45-degree angle backwards almost. And there's a captain, an expert on the wheel, obviously. He comes in, he's able to spin that thing around, slide it in next to the dock. They lock in the ropes. You think, man, I mean, massive, there's like 1,000 people on the thing when it's full, and all these people, this big ship, all this metal, and there's a rudder. Probably the smallest piece of equipment on the whole ship that moves right or left. The rudder, so important. Think about it. You hit to open seas. It's the difference of being in Copenhagen or Hong Kong. Right or left? My wife and I, when we got married, we didn't have a lot of money. We actually opened up cards on our honeymoon. Like the first morning, we went to Movenpix in downtown Toronto, and we took the cards from the basket and opened them up to get cash to go on our honeymoon. And we're like, thank you. Gift cards, well, they'll have to wait. And we went to two timeshare talks while we're down. We went to Florida. You know what I mean, timeshare talks, right? Yeah, so you're sitting there for 4 hours and they go and get another guy to see if he can get you and go get another guy, and they're all trying to, We're on our honeymoon. Every dollar I have is on her finger on her left hand. I'm a pastor that lives in a house that's owned by the church. She just finished teacher's college and has got school debt. I mean, we had literally half a pack of extra gum and a ring. The first group, I sit with this guy, talk to him, and finally by the second one I got a little bolder. I says, "You're gonna waste your time, but I'm telling you, do you think I would be here talking to you if I had the money to buy this vacation place down in Florida? No, I don't." One of the things we got with that was an extra. You could pay an extra $200 per person and go on a cruise, a $200 cruise to Bahamas. It was just a little bit bigger than a 16-foot Lund. We got on the cruise, and the funny part was it got shorter and shorter. We got a few days, and we were on our way back. We got up in the morning. We were supposed to arrive back at port in Cape Canaveral, and we were supposed to get off the ship and get our rental car. We rented a car for that day to drive to the airport and fly out that afternoon. I wake up in the morning. We were supposed to be at port at 6 o'clock in the morning. We were getting off at about 7 or 8 o'clock. So we got up. I looked out the window, and I didn't see land anywhere. Finally said, there's been some difficulties. We'll keep you posted. All right. 10:30, we found out that they had a problem with the ship, its ability to steer and its ability to propel itself. Well, those are two kind of essential components to a ship. And we were basically bobbing. Hook us to a line, and we are bait. I mean, we are just out there in the middle, floating around, barely making it back, limping. They said, we're not going to make it back today. We're going to make it back hopefully tomorrow. Missed our flights, missed our rental car. This is our honeymoon. Great times. And they also said, sorry for the inconvenience, but just because we feel so bad and we want to make your experience as best as possible, it's an open bar. Great. As if the ship's not tippy enough. Everyone is... You know what? Every time I was reading this about how a ship came from, I keep thinking of that. Now, we were the first ones off. And a funny thing, they said, we're going to be handling this by a case-by-case basis. Here's a letter. You need to contact our customer service department. So we did. You know what they gave us? Free cruise. They gave us a free cruise. It started off, we'll give you half off your next cruise. I'm not kidding you. That's what they said. Wow, half off. What half? The half that's like us stranded in the middle? I'd like to take that half off of our trip, please. If we can. A big ship. I remember being out there and how helpless we were because we didn't have propulsion or we did not have steering. Doesn't matter how mighty it is. The tongue itself is a tiny part of the body. Weighs about 2 to 3 ounces. That means, depending if you're an average weight of a person, it's 1/10 of 1% of your body. But think of the pain it causes the body, the headaches it causes the body, and the anguish. It's tiny, but as Proverbs says, is the power of life and death. Here's a sobering reminder, verse 5, one more illustration. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. A tongue is a fire starter. It only takes a spark to get a fire going. Remember that song? It only takes a spark to get a fire going. Remember that? That's true about spreading God's love. It's also true about some less noble activities. The Chicago fire, some of you may remember it in American history, October 8th, 1871, lasted 3 days. The one story says that it was a cow in Mrs. O'Leary's barn that kicked a lantern over. I don't know exactly what happened. Obviously, it wasn't there. Investigators were able to prove that the fire that took 3 days to put out started in the O'Leary barn. One barn. One fire. It would affect and consume 17,500 buildings, take 300 lives, leave 100,000 people homeless, cost in damage about 200 million, which is about 4 to 5 billion in today's dollars. All from one fire in one barn. Fire in the fireplace, good. Fire in the living room carpet, bad. Problem's not fire. Problem is its application. And the application of this illustration never grows old. We live in a contentious, angry, filled with so many voices, arguments, name-calling, blaming, destroying world. where we need to watch what we say. It's a warning from James that gives very good practical advice in every area of our life. Loose lips sink more than just ships. Sinks marriages, friendships, partnerships, the rumors, the violence. It's better to say nothing than speak when you're angry. It's better to bite your tongue than wish you had. It's better to stay out of the conflict than to make it worse. One of my favorites is better than, it tells us to stay out of conflict in Proverbs. It says, grabbing a passing dog by the ear is someone who jumps into an argument not their own. So, I'll give you 3 applications as we close, and we're going to close the service with a baptismal. Number 1, stop and think before you speak. I think that's what James is trying to get across here in James chapter 3. And I'm not saying just when you're speaking to others and how it affects them. You can, in a way, fan the flame of the fire in your own soul by what you say. We can upset ourselves by unnecessarily talking about our problems. Not too long ago, I had a situation that was disappointing. And every time I talked about it, I'd get upset. It'd bother me. And when I would talk about it, it would bother me to the point where I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I found that if I started to talk about it, I'd talk about it more. And it would upset me more the more I talked about it. Other people would bring it up to me. When they would talk about it, when I would hear it, then I would talk about it. And then it would get worse. I came to the realization, it's better for me to not talk about it. Now, I'm not saying deny it and don't talk to people and don't deal with your problems and your troubles. I'm just saying the rehearsing of them, the retelling of them over and over and over again. It is a bad movie. Stop watching it. Proverbs talks about hasty speech. When words are many, sin is not absent, and he who holds his tongue is wise. Proverbs 13:3, he who guards his lips guards his life, but he who speaks rashly will come to ruin. A man of knowledge uses words with restraint. And finally, even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. We know, okay, I get it. I'm better off if some things I just don't say them. But how do you do this? I've heard different things. There's one that's called think, but I heard someone else, a friend of mine, use TNK or TKN. First of all, is it true? Second of all, is it necessary? Thirdly, is it kind? Paul talks about everything is permissible, but not necessarily beneficial. That's one of these things. Is it necessary? Might be true, might be fact. Somebody, hey, listen, listen, this is as true for pulpit as pew. This is, we can share the gospel in a way that is not right, and it's still the gospel. But we can say things that might be true, but not necessary. We can speak truth, but don't excuse truth and wrap your own agenda, the way you deliver it, in the blanket of truth. Might be true, still might not be necessary. True, kind, necessary is a great thing. Stop for a second and think, is this right? Is this true? Do I know this to be true? Is it kind and is it necessary? Our words may not be the cause of all our problems, but one thing's for sure, the wrong words can cause problems. Surrender. Yield. If you're thinking of a stoplight, the red light, this is the yellow, the amber. Caution. Yield. God has given us a new nature. Renew our mind and our attitude. Fill us with the Spirit of God. Speaking words, positive words, based on God's words. It's one of the most wholesome things we can do. Out of the outflow of the heart, our mouth speaks. The tongue is not the problem. Listen to this. Stephen Davey said this. The tongue is simply the messenger that delivers the mail composed by the heart. The tongue is the tattletale of the heart. Yield your tongue to God. Here's a good prayer. We're going to pray this in just a few moments. Ever told the Lord, I've been using my tongue for myself, and now I'm going to use it for you. Here are my lips. They speak for you. Here's my mouth. Let my mouth speak the words you want it to. To man belongs the plans of heart, but to the Lord comes the reply of the tongue. The tongue can be put under control with God's help. He can give you new lips, a new tongue, a new heart. Take my life and let it be, consecrated, Lord, to thee. A hymn. Take my lips and let them be filled with messages for thee. Recently I ran across a prayer that says it well too. Lord, fill my mouth with worthwhile stuff and nudge me when I've said enough. So my last point. Go. Green. Don't just don't say. Speak words of life. Words are wonderful when used in the proper way. A man has joy in an apt answer, and how delightful is a timely word. Literally, we can increase our joy by speaking right words. Let me give you an illustration. When you wake up in the morning, and it's a morning you're not looking forward to. I'm not sure, it might be something at work, it might be facing that creditor, I'm not sure what the day is, but it is a morning you are not looking forward to. When you wake up in that morning, you could say, I dread this day. This is the worst day. Or you could say, God will give me strength today to do whatever I need to do to give me joy despite of how difficult this day may be. Now, which one of those you think is going to prepare you for actually facing one of the hardest days you face? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, this is all positive confession, that I'm going to just say, this is the best day ever, when it's not looking like it's going to be the best day ever. I don't believe you can change your circumstances by just saying nicey nice things. Peachy keen cleans everything fine. I am saying that speaking words of life can definitely improve the way we face our difficult days. Speaking negatively can definitely hurt us and others as well. How delightful is a timely word. I'm so thankful for you. You're a blessing to me. I appreciate you because God has placed you in a special place in His kingdom for this reason. You encourage me. I see that you are capable. You can do it. You are a rock. You are a joy. I believe in you. Those kind of things speak words of life and strength. We see them, reserve them for raising up children, speaking words of life, but they still bring life to even the oldest of souls. Stores up confidence, helps us know we're loved, appreciated, and accepted. I'm going to have the worship team come. And finally, may I say, in your relationships, in your homes, and in your marriages, we all have a choice to make. We can look at faults, we can be bitter, defend our rights, justify our actions. We can lecture or give complaints. We can pile on guilt or discouragement. Or we can speak words of life, words of future. I've said this before, and anybody that's done pre-marriage class with me as I help them prepare for a special wedding day, I share a strict caution to never say the D word. I know divorce is a tough thing, and for some situations, it is the only answer. But I'm simply saying how guarded we need to be from speaking words of separation and destruction. Something happens in our spirit and our soul when one person in the relationship speaks about finishing things, speaks about ending things. It's like a little rip on a plastic bag that's able to hold everything no problem until all of a sudden it gets a tear, and then it starts to tear. I simply just caution. Say what you need to say. Say I'm frustrated. Say I'm discouraged. Tell them how you feel. But stay away from attacking the relationship. What you say in those moments has a lot of power and impacts your future together. Words of love, respect, and support. Words of forgiveness, on the contrary, are foundational to moving forward together. Same goes with friendship, ministry, church, work situations. Choose to be a blessing. Speak words of life. I want to read from Isaiah 6. Would you stand with me? Here's Isaiah. He comes to God. He's made some mistakes. I want to read this and then we're going to pray. Woe to me, Isaiah said. I cried. I am ruined. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. You can tell he's recognizing words have been on my mouth and words on others has not been clean. Then one of the seraphim flew with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar, and he touched my mouth. He says, see, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away. Your sin atoned for. And then I heard a voice from heaven saying, listen how fast this happens. A voice from heaven says, whom shall I send and whom will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. And he said, go and tell. Listen to the transition. My words have been unclean. I've made mistakes with my mouth. Then a cleansing comes from the altar. And immediately the question, who will go? The next thing that comes out of the mouth of the unclean lips was, I'll go, send me. And then the commission, then go and tell. It's not like you got to go through a probationary period. There is still cleansing. Whatever you've said, whatever you've done, whatever you've written, there is cleansing today as you come to Him and surrender to Him your mouth and your words. The issue, your heart. So I want to lead today as we close in a prayer.